What's up, guys? Well, today we're going to be talking about Cha-ching! The Deathless by Peter Newman. Haha. So, guys, last year I read The Vagrant by Peter Newman, and it really blew me away. I thought that thing was just an imaginative piece of fantasy that really kicked ass. It also contained some just gnarly, darker toned stuff that was really up my alley as well. It had like a dystopian feel, all that. So I knew after reading that book I was going to get into some more Peter Newman. It was just kind of a shake of whether I was going to push further into the Vagrant trilogy or start some of Newman's like newer work. And so instead of, finishing a trilogy like I should, I start another one. So, The Deathless by Peter Newman. If you guys are expecting something like The Vagrant, I will say get ready to be surprised. While I do think that this book holds that level of imagination that Peter Newman can bring to a story, that's all there. The vibe, the tone, and just like the plotting, everything else is vastly different. Where The Vagrant is very much an ambiguous tale a lot of the times, and you could, it leaves you for speculation. Here, this is a very much more tighter story. There are things happening, and there is always a reason for said things, and it really is all to build and boil this political intrigue that is the meat and potatoes of the book. So here in The Deathless, Peter Newman's going to bring us as the reader to a world that is just filled with forests. Now, that might sound awesome, but the thing is these forests are the wilds. They are where things go bump in the night, and they also go bump in the day. It's just a bad place to be because there are terrors that lurk. Now, with this being the state of the world, essentially, mankind is kind of squeaking out their existence by living next to these crystal roads known as God Roads. Now, these God Roads lead to crystal castles, and within the crystal castles reside basically royal families. There are several of them, and each of them are known as the Deathless. Now, these royal lines are immortal in a way by using their descendants as like new bodies to inhabit. So you might have an old member of the family and then a baby just being born, and that baby is going to be what the older member of the family, like it's going to be their new body once it gets to a certain age. It's a very interesting take on not only reincarnation, but also immortality. Now, we will follow several different perspectives and from different families. And this really does help the reader kind of understand the ins and outs of the Deathless. Because, like I said, it's not just one royal line, it's like multiple. And so there's a lot of politics involved. Not just within their own houses, but how they are kind of interact with one another, as well as their duty to the wilds. There's a lot that goes into this thing, and it is just steeped to holy hell with political intrigue, way more than I was expecting, but I gotta admit, it's all done very well. Now, one thing you can expect from this book is that level of imagination that Peter Newman brings to a story. If you've read The Vagrant, you know that thing was packed to the gills with imagination, and it was fucking bizarre, bonkers, bananas, all in the best way. So now, while I will say that The Deathless holds that same level, at least like it has that height of imagination, it feels much more grounded. It's not this bonkers banana stuff. It feels much more like a fantasy style of imagination. You get crystal armor, along with the crystal roads and castles that have crystal wings, and there's these crystal weapons. It's just, there's all this crystal imagery that is really beautiful and just awesome. And it feels fantastical, and it's really easy to eat up. And each one of these families, these Deathless families, is named after like another gem or diamond or whatever, so they all kind of have a different look, which is, once again, it's kind of nice and refreshing, so it's not like just being beat over the head with the same stuff over and over. There is a little, mixture in there. So it is, once again, it's just really cool imagery, as well as imaginative as all fuck. Now, like I said, I do think it's much more grounded, and it's also more shiny. It has that like bling style imagination to it, but that doesn't mean there's no dark stuff in this book. And I do think that the darker tone stuff, though I feel a lot more far and few in between as something like The Vagrant, it is still very imaginative. And Peter Newman has a very unorthodox way of creating these things that can get under your skin or creep you out in unexpected ways. Angles you just weren't seeing kind of coming. And also, like I mentioned earlier, the political intrigue in this story is just turned up to 11. Something I just wasn't expecting. It's not that it was bad. I just had no idea what I was getting into. And it was nuts, man. At one point I was like, holy fuck, like I feel like I'm in a soap opera. And not in a bad way, guys. Like I look at like Game of Thrones is like a soap opera to me. The way that it's just so filled with political intrigue. The drama between characters is such a big part of the story that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. I'm not trying to compare it to some shitty ass piece of television. I'm trying to talk about the good parts, I guess, of it being kind of like a soap opera. It is, if you're looking for that kind of vibe, I do think that you will be massively satisfied with this book. I do have to mention that there is two like areas of the story that I feel suffer personally, and it's because I think of just how I approached the book. By not knowing anything about it and being kind of surprised by all this political intrigue, I do feel like I felt like there was a lack of action, which is a little crazy because there's plenty of action in the story. It's just not fucking overflowing with action, which makes sense. It's a political story. So it's a weird con just personally, and like I said, I think if I didn't have any expectations, I don't know if this con would even be being mentioned. But I need to say it because maybe if you're coming off of something like The Vagrant and jumping into this, you might be expecting a little bit more sword swinging or just, good all around violence nonstop. That is not this story. It's just not. So it's hard for me to say that this book actually lacks action. It's just not going to be the action extravaganza that you might be thinking it's going to be, all right? That, and then just the overall characters. Now, this is book one in a trilogy, and the characters are done well. But this is one thing I find kind of across the board. When you start hitting me with a lot of perspectives, it takes me a minute to get into these characters. So I actually am at this place with pretty much across the board with the characters. I don't hate any of them. I don't dislike any of them. But I'm not jumping out of my seat for any of them either. I'm just kind of along for the ride. I'm willing to, spend my time with each of them and not bitch about it. So there's nothing, I have to mention that because I felt like the characters were nothing to shout at the moon about, but they're also nothing to condemn in any way, shape, or form. So, Now, as far as my 2 cents for the slow and the struggling, I do actually feel like The Deathless is a great book, especially if you're trying to get into some political intrigue. Peter Newman's writing style, his prose, is not something that's going to overwhelm you, but I do think that his plotting and everything in here is much more turned up than his last stuff, so it will present a challenge. You will have to pay attention. This is not just going to be a light action ride, okay? There's a lot of, people are doing this, people are doing that. You have to keep tabs on this stuff because that's how the drama is going to build and hit you in the right spot, right? So this can definitely present a challenge to slow and struggling readers, especially because some of you might really be running away from books like this. You might be, and I'm guilty of throwing recommendations at you guys that are fast-paced, high-octane reads. That is not this book. But it's also not a 1,000,000-page chonker that's written so dense that you have to spend half an hour pondering about each sentence. It's just not that kind of book either, okay? It's something that you will have to take your time with. And by the time you get to the other side, that challenge has made you a better reader. You are now going to be a little bit more attentive on the next book. You might be able to tackle something with more perspectives later on. It's just, in my opinion, a very good book to be looking at as far as challenging yourself with political intrigue as well as multiple perspectives. Well, as always, guys, thanks for spending some time down here at the channel. And to Peter Newman, akadoosh, 2 thumbs up, man. This is a book that definitely surprised me, but by the end, I was very, very pleased that I got into it, and it's definitely something I'm going to push further into. I'll probably end up finishing this before I go back to the Vagrant trilogy. We'll see. I got loads of stuff on my fucking plate, guys. I got an intense amount of reading to do, and I'll probably never, ever finish it. It's a good fucking problem to have, eh? All right. If you're still here listening to me, I want you to grab a piece of paper and a pen and write this down. What am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my life that is so wrong that it has led me to watch this fucking prick? Stay classy.